Start the meeting of the Code Board for Lake Clark Shores, April 23rd, 6:30 PM. Emily, would you please call roll?
Chair Paul Hughes,
Present.
Vice Chair Gerard Sanchez, Board Member Deb Moody,
Present.
Board Member Wesley Cook,
Present.
Board Member Miguel Espinosa, Board Member Patricia Keough,
Here.
Board Member Morty Mills.
It's present.
Okay, we'll now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
thank you.
You have one more of those papers?
Yes,
You can.
yes.
No.
There you go. Actually,
Did I miscount?
No, we're good.
it's fine.
The next item of business is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of our March 26th meeting, our consent agenda for the March 26th meeting, and cases now in compliance. Eric, are there cases now in compliance for tonight's meeting?
Yes. First of all, good evening, Chairman Hughes. Good evening, board members. All right, starting on page 2, bottom of the page, case 25-0043 is now in compliance. Going over to page 3, top of the page, case 25-0047 is in compliance. Page 4, starting from the top, cases 25-0085 is in compliance. Case 25-0086 is in compliance. Case 25-0088 is in compliance. And case 25-0129 is in compliance. That concludes all cases that are now in compliance.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the disclosure of visits. If there is anyone that's particularly familiar with any of the cases that are come before us tonight, or if you need to disclose any information about those cases, if you would please do so at the time we hear those cases.
My only thing is that my brother-in-law is representing the witness, so I don't know if that's
Your brother-in-law is representing
the witness.
Mr. Gonzalez, and that's case 240343.
Yes.
Okay. Swearing in of witnesses. Anyone that's going to be speaking tonight before the board, if you'd please rise and be sworn in by the town's attorney.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. And just for the record, the reason that witnesses are sworn in is that the law in Florida, because this is a quasi judicial hearing, not a legislative hearing, requires that any testimony given be substantial and competent testimony, and that is defined in Florida law as sworn testimony.
Okay, thank you. Our first case is Nouveau Mar LLC, 75112 Edgewater Circle, 240343. At our last meeting, we moved to impose a lien on that property of $12,000. I assume that has not been filed yet. Emily?
No, because you gave them 30 days to pay.
Okay. And how many days are we now? Let's see.
30 days is on April 25th, so it's in 2 days.
Okay. Mr. Gonzalez, I guess you're here to give us any new or additional information we didn't hear at the last meeting.
That is correct, Chairman. Thank you very much. My name is Robert Gonzalez. I am very, very honored to be in front of the Code Enforcement Board again. My address is 1420 South Lake Court. Although I'm not here on my behalf, I have the pleasure of representing Ms. Gisela Moro, who is the president of Nuevo Mar LLC. The address in question today is 7512 Edgewater Circle. Like you read into the case, it is case number 240343. So before we get into a little bit of the journey of how we got here, I did want to clarify a bit who the respondent is. Ms. Morrow is a realtor by trade. Over the past decade, I believe, she's had up to 14 different properties in Lake Clark Shores. And that's a significant number of properties. She is extremely invested in the community. Prior to this particular enforcement case for the windows being installed without a permit, the only violation that we could find or determine on any one of those properties was a violation for failure to have house numbers affixed to the home during, I believe it was this home or another home, while it was being repainted. So this is really the very first enforcement case and enforcement action that she's ever been a part of. Unfortunately, at some of the prior board meetings, there was a question as to whether, why she was not present. That is a notice issue. I don't want to bother the board with it because I think that what we have to say today kind of circumvents that, but she does, and it is very important to her. She is wants to be very compliant with Lake Clark Shores and with whatever Lake Clark Shores dictates. Especially this particular property was an investment property, and I think it's important to know that somebody that is a professional real estate agent, realtor, would not jeopardize being able to sell a home later on to someone else for a pretty significant amount of money. It was $1.69 million. And so the only reason I bring up the sale price is that obviously failure to have a permit would jeopardize the conveyance of that property. It really kind of gums up the gears of the whole system. So she is somebody that is a sophisticated operator. She did hire what she thought to be a general contractor. Later on came to be known that this particular person was using someone else's license and failed to submit for the permit, which I'll show you later on in the slide. She did complain to the DBPR, which is the regulatory agency responsible for managing the contractor licenses. So all that to say that this is very important, and we are here today to request that for a reduction of the lien or of the fine prior to it being enforced. And I know that we do have the 30 days, and we are coming right up to that time where she either has to pay or forced, and this is not a threat, this is purely a mechanics of the law, she would have to file a formalized notice of appeal to the circuit court, which would not only cost her money, but it would also cost the town money. And truly, as a resident, and the majority of us here are residents, we want to be good stewards of the money that Lake Clark Shores spends. So without further ado, I do want to point your attention. I did pass out, and I'll just briefly read it into the records just so that it's clear. Dear board members, this memorandum is submitted on behalf of my client, Ms. Gisela Moro, president of Nuevo Mar LLC, in connection with the $12,000 lien imposed on March 26, 2025, relating to a violation of section 10-91A of the town code for window installation without a permit at the subject address. We respectfully submit that due to the ambiguity in the statute, specifically the absence of any language requiring a final inspection, and we'll get into that in the slides, requiring a final inspection to establish compliance, the assessed fine should be set at $0. Section 10-91 clearly requires the application for a permit, which Ms. Morrow completed and paid for prior to the compliance deadline established by the board, which was October 30th of 2024. She acted in good faith, relying on statutory language and taking immediate steps to correct the issue once it was brought to her attention. That said, in an effort to resolve this matter amicably and avoid unnecessary litigation, Ms. Morrow is willing to accept a reduced lien in the amount of $1,000. This accounts for the brief period between the permit payment on October 28th and its issuance on November 4th. Should this reasonable request not be granted, Ms. Morrow will be compelled to file a notice of appeal within 24 hours against the town of Lake Clark Shores to preserve her rights. We believe that the cost of litigating this matter in circuit court would exceed the value of the lien itself, impose an unnecessary burden on both parties, and ultimately result in the reversal due to the lack of legal foundation for requiring a final inspection under the cited code. I have put in some additional attachments. I do apologize that it was printed on front and back, but there are 4 more attachments here. One is the permit information, which in the upper left-hand corner shows the date that it was paid, which is October 28th of 2024. In that same upper left-hand corner, it does show the issuance date of November 4th of 2024. Later on page 3, or the second page as you're going through the packet, the inspection date occurred on December 18th of 2024, where it passed. And then later on, the last 2 pages is a copy of the notice of violation, which we obtained from Lake Clark Shores, showing in pertinent part the section 10-91. So with that being said, I just wanted to read that into the record, and I wanted to point your attention to the slideshow. What the first slide is showing is essentially just a screenshot of the case and what it's about. What I've highlighted or underlined here is the violation of section 10-91A very specifically. And in the next slide is the actual violation language. So on the left-hand side, it's a little bit difficult to read. And there's another slide that'll be a little bit better. But the left side is the municipal ordinance for the town of Lake Clark Shores, taken directly from MuniCode. On the right, this is the order from this board that is explaining and says, does cite section 10-91A. Section 10-91A, in pertinent part, subsection A, application says that any owner, and then it has a lot of legalese and a lot of commas, but essentially is saying shall complete an application. Shall, in the law, we always say that as must. There's no way around it. So shall complete an application. And in the black letter way of interpreting this, what we see from this ordinance is that somebody violating section 10-91 subsection A must have a permit. And in violating it, the remedy to that is to complete an application. Notice how it doesn't say issuance of an application. It doesn't say final. So it just says shall complete an application. Unfortunately, on the right-hand side, the order later on said shall comply with section 10-91A of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Lake Clark Shores by October 30th. And remember, October 28th was when the permit was paid for. It was not issued, but it was paid for on October 28th, 2 days before the deadline given by this. So it also goes on to say the respondent must pass final inspection. Unfortunately, in our opinion, the way that we are reading this and the way that we're analyzing this particular case is that that is outside of the scope of the ordinance. The ordinance is very tight when it comes to shall complete an application. Next slide, please. And just as a way of understanding, really the issue does go back to July 8th of 2024, brief timeline of events. September 6th, the glass was delivered and the installation was started. Just a few short days afterwards, the notice of violation did occur. And what you notice, and what's important, I want to bring your attention to this, September 25th, essentially 15 days after that violation, Ms. Morrow filed a complaint with the DBPR complaining about this person who was now operating and doing work to her house without a permit. Just spacebar, or next slide, it should bring up the copy of the violation. Spacebar again, or click. And so what I've highlighted or circled in red is section 10-91A. This is the notice. This is, the very, very first step in this journey is that you are giving notice to the homeowner of what section was actually violated. Section 10-91A, windows have been installed without a permit, which I think is a very clear violation. And we now look to the ordinance to see how we cure that violation would be by submitting this application and completing it. If we click one more time, and it says in the corrective action, please obtain required permit. Does not mention a final permit, does not mention, that finality of it. Next slide, please. This is just so that you guys have a copy of the complaint to the DBPR, which is timestamped in the upper left-hand corner. This is generated by the state of Florida, and it shows September 25th, 2024 at 5:16 p.m., wherein she is complaining to the DBPR of this this conduct that violates essentially the license. Next slide, please. This slide is a zoomed in view of the ordinance for Lake Clark Shores on the top, and then also the order from this board on the bottom. And it does show, it says shall comply with section 10-91A of the Code of Ordinances. And then it says, the respondent must pass final inspection to come into compliance. But again, it's our opinion that that is outside the scope. Slide, please. So the pertinent timeline of events, the permit application was actually submitted October 17th, which is, just maybe a week after that one of the violations, because I think the violation occurred September. Okay, so
September 10th.
thank you, Mr. Mills. So the permit was submitted on October 17th. And then on October 23rd, compliance was ordered by this board by October 30th. Just 5 days later, the permit fee of, I believe it was 3 or 4 times, was paid. And then on October 31st, a $250 a day fine began accruing, but she had already submitted the application, which we know that in reading the black letter law of the ordinance, the only thing required of her is to submit an application, or complete an application, I should say. And then November 4th is when the permit was actually applied. I missed that in the timeline, I apologize, but the permit was actually issued November 4th. So I will submit, and there was a couple of days between her payment of the application or of the permit and then its actual issuance. Even though the ordinance only says that an application shall be completed, we would submit, in fairness, the permit was issued, just to be fair, on the 4th, and that represents approximately 4 days or so. So just in takeaway, and I'm sorry I'm taking up so much of your time because I know that we all have families at home. The fines are imposed after Ms. Morrow had already taken corrective action. One of the big canons of, and really the purpose of this board is to gain compliance. You want people to be in compliance and to pay attention with the important orders that this board is coming up with, and also making sure that our ordinances are complied with. We do feel that Ms. Morrow was in compliance since the permit was applied for on October 17th and then later paid on the 28th prior to the deadline. So really, in sum, the $12,000 lien imposed on March 26th punishes good faith remedial efforts taken before and during the permit process. We respectfully ask that this board consider the reduction of the lien. We feel that it should be zero, but as a compromise, $1,000 is something that we are prepared to offer.
Mr. Gonzalez, could you remind me, please, why, well, first of all, according to the notice of violation, the windows had been installed
That is correct.
prior to September 10th.
The work started,
Because the notice is on September 10th and the notice says windows have been installed without permit,
September 6th. So the notice was given 9/10.
right?
And we know, just from my conversations and the text messages and the information that we have, September 6th, 2024 is when the glass was delivered, because there was a delivery receipt. And apparently the installation started because the contractor had asked for money from Miss Morrow. One of the clauses of the contract, which really has no binding effect here, but that contractor is motivated by money. And once that glass gets delivered, he wants to hurry up and get that installation going and get another progress payment from Miss Morrow.
Sure. And you said how many properties did she?
Up to
owned in town?
14.
14 in town. So she's probably had work done.
With permits, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And she relied on good faith reliance on a contractor.
But here, excuse me, one more second. But here we have like 5 weeks between the notice and the permit application.
Correct. So
What happened in the 5 weeks?
she moved. She previously had a home. She moved from one side of the lake to the other side of the lake.
But she's got a telephone. I mean, it's not like she was,
No, I understand. She never got a copy of the actual violation. She later became aware of the violation from a neighbor. You gotta be sworn in, and don't worry.
you can be sworn in if you want to talk. Okay.
Go ahead, get sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Come on down.
So my question is, what happened in 5 weeks between the time the notice of violation and you actually applied for the permit, or someone representing you filed for the
Yeah,
permit?
I never knew about the violation until one of our neighbors texted me and said, Gigi, last night in the meeting, I saw one of your properties had a violation. And I was like, no, there's no way. There's got to be a mistake. She goes, no, there is a violation on windows that apparently you started installing without a permit. And I said, the only property that I have right now, which yes, they deliver the windows and they are supposed to be installed, is Edgewater. So let me check. There's got to be a mistake. So I called Melissa and she confirmed. She said, Gigi, yes, there is no permit. And I'm like, how can there not be a permit? I signed for the permit application. I signed the notice of commencement. Are you sure? So I actually called the GC, who clearly is not a licensed GC. He paid for the license. And we got into it back and forth. I even showed my attorney the text messages and it was confirmed. I wasn't aware. So right away I came to the town and I even met with Joe, the town manager, and he explained that now there was, a fine, they needed to be paid and I needed to apply. I hired my current GC, Norland, who was doing the rest of the renovation. And I hired him to do the job.
What was the date of the complaint with the DBPR?
9/25.
I thought
And
it was
this is
July.
a bit of a red herring here.
It was in July.
Right. what I
It was
saw,
nine, it was September of 2020, September 25th of
you
2024.
can go back a couple of slides.
Sure. But really, if we look to the black letter of the violation, you know, even if she was a homeowner that basically willfully disregarded,
July 8th of 2024 is the incident date.
that's when that's when he was hired. That's when the contract was done. But the date in the upper left-hand corner is 9/25 of 24.
So you
But
signed a
regardless.
contract with Biscayne back in July of 2024 to do these windows? Okay. And at that time, he represented to you that he would obtain a permit?
Yes, he even made me sign the notice of commencement and the permit application. And between that time and the incident of the violation, I come to the town often because of my other properties. I even asked Melissa, I said, this guy, he came and he's doing his job, right? Because he's supposed to get the permit before he starts installing. She said, yeah, he came, he had a couple of questions and he was supposed to bring something back. I don't know, whatever that was. So I was all this time under the impression that of course he had a permit because, I mean, I wouldn't even dare start installing an entire home, all the windows, all the doors without a permit. That would be kind of crazy. And yeah.
But even if she was a willfully disregarding what this board or what the ordinance wanted, even if she was a bad resident, which she's not, please let the record be clear. If you look at the black face, the black letter on the face of the violation or the complaint, it is citing 10-91 subsection A. The remedy for that is to go and apply for the application or for the permit. It is the completed, it says here, it shall complete an application. Doesn't even say it should be issued. It's just to complete it. And obviously in the completion of it is the payment. And the penalty for not having it is to pay 4 times the value of the permit. So there is a penalty built in there. So
Your client says that she signed the permit to have the windows put in. Is that correct?
To pull the permit.
To pull the permit. You
Yes.
signed that.
Yes, he made me sign it.
Okay. And how often have you used this contractor or had you used this contractor?
I want to say 2 or 3 times, maybe 3 times.
Did you have to follow up to see if he actually filed the permits previously?
No, previously he was fine. He had done the job. He had passed final inspections. I didn't have,
So what
Issues.
happened in this case? Something must have happened between you and the contractor.
I personally think that he wanted the money so bad, instead of doing the job, waiting to get the permit approved. This guy wanted money because I could tell he was pressuring me, and the only way he could get the additional $10,000 was per contract once he delivered and started installing. So I personally think that he needed the money, even though he didn't have the permit. He just wanted to.
So a question for our attorney. What is your thought or your insight into the fact that the permit is not completed until it's been inspected? I think that's basically what Attorney Gonzalez is saying.
And I was asked to review this matter along with Mr. Doney in my office after Mr. Gonzalez met with the town manager. And I have reviewed it. The question I have is, what was the violation on November 5th? On November 4th, a permit was issued, and the notice from the code inspector and the language in the town's ordinance says doing work without a permit. And as I read the statute, as I read the ordinance, as I read the violation notice on November 5th, actually on November 4th, the date the permit was issued, there is no longer a violation because the code and the notice of the code states doing work without a permit. And on the 4th, there was a permit, so they couldn't be in violation once that permit was issued. Now, there's a question dealing with the language in the ordinance because it says apply for a permit. Well, if I come in and apply for a permit on today, that doesn't mean that tomorrow I can start working
Right.
because I haven't obtained the permit yet. In this case, the work was already done. So I believe the 4 days where the work had already been done and there was no permit clearly entitles the town to apply the $250 a day penalty. And therefore, my advice to the town manager was that I would be happy if this case is appealed to the circuit court to defend the town's position. But in all honesty, I need to tell you that you're going to pay me a fee to defend the town. And in all likelihood, you're going to lose that appeal because the code says doing work without a permit. The notice of violation says doing work without a permit. And on the 4th, a permit was issued, and therefore no work was being done without a permit for that time period up until December 18th. So I think that the town should favorably consider the request to reduce the lien to $1,000 and avoid the possibility of an appeal to the circuit court. Now, that said, in cases like this where a permit was not pulled and the work was begun, the case before the code enforcement board should not be closed. It should be kept open until the permit is, or the work is inspected and finalized, so that if the person does not come back and get the final inspection, that you do not have to file a new case. You simply bring that case back for the failure then to inspect and finalize the work.
But that language is drawn from the building code,
Yes,
not the town.
Charlie,
that's correct.
can I add 2 points onto that?
Sure.
Okay, so I did reach out to Palm Beach County Code Enforcement. I gave them, a scenario based on work without a permit. I spoke to their code enforcement supervisor. The process that they do is when they find work being done without a permit, they will issue a violation. However, if a permit is applied for, the violation stays open. However, once the permit process has been completed, the violation simply is closed. However, if the permit fails, like if they go to open it, for whatever reason it gets dismissed, or if they fail an inspection, that's when they would then bring it before the code enforcement board. I also reached out to Jupiter, and I spoke to their code enforcement supervisor. He concurred that that's the same process that they follow. So based on what Attorney Scheck is saying, it seems as though the county and Jupiter and other municipalities follow that similar process. So I actually do agree and concur with the town attorney.
But that's based on the possibility that their ordinances are written the same way that ours are written, in that it says that they have to apply. Applying does not mean they're going to be getting a permit.
And that's why I take the position that the town had every right to impose the fine from the date that the permit was applied for to the date that it was actually issued. That you're not required to go back to October 28th, but you are looking at the date of November 4th, the date of issuance of the permit, not the date of application of the permit.
So they've already done a final and it passed back in December, if I'm not mistaken.
That is the last attachment that you have in the packet. And I will, just as a point of clarification, Mr. Scheck, you're saying that this board gave a deadline until October 30th, and you're saying that the violation or the $250 starts October 31st, November 1st?
I
November
didn't
2nd.
look at the date as to when it started, but you are in violation up until the date that permit is issued, even though the code says apply for the permit because the work was done prior to that. If the work had not been done, we wouldn't be even here.
Understood, but under the way that the order was written from this board, that they gave her the deadline until October 30th.
I'd have to go back and
So
look
if
at
we go
that.
back a slide, or maybe, no, perfect, right there. So go, yep. So it says, it is the order of the code enforcement board that respondent shall
Yes.
comply with section 10-91. So
By
October
30th, yes.
31st is a violation. November
Correct.
1st is a violation. November 2nd is a violation. November 3rd is a violation. November 4th, no violation.
Correct.
So 4 days.
And my concern is if there's an appeal and the judge asks the town on November 5th, what's the violation? Because the code says doing work without a permit and there's a permit issued, I think
Mhm.
the town's likelihood of prevailing in that case is slim.
Comments, questions?
I mean, I firmly believe that Gigi's been a great resident and she brings a lot of value to this town. I don't think anybody up here would probably disagree with that. She brings new residents in. She's been operating for I don't know how many years. I don't know her on a personal level. I bumped into her. Unfortunately, my brother-in-law is representing her, so I really don't have any further comment. But her properties are nice. I mean, this is going through the permitting process myself. I've also ran into a hiccup. Thankfully, I was able to work with Melissa, get this done in a really quick turnaround. But I understand what she's going through. Contractors do lie to obtain security. It's hard to have all the due diligence in front of you when you're trying to manage a project such as a renovation. So I think that I'm gonna side with the town attorney here.
Pat, you any questions?
No.
Wes?
I think we take the advice of the attorney. You know, he's
Deb?
interpreted, both attorneys, I guess, at this.
I would take the advice of the town attorney, but I also think that maybe it's time we took a look at some of our ordinances and how they're written.
And I think that's an appropriate comment.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Eric.
volunteer for any of that review.
Eric, thank you for your due diligence on this too.
Wes, would you like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion. Based on testimony evidence presented in case number 24-0343, I move this board reduces the fine of $12,000 to $1,000 plus administrative costs. If respondents fail to pay the fine of $1,000 within
30 days.
30 days of this order, a lien against the respondent's property shall be recorded in the public records of Palm Beach County.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much for your time and attention, and thank you for all of your service to this town.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Ms. Morrow, thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
You have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe the next case is a lien imposition hearing. Case 240391. Jessica Hazard and Michael McKenzie, 7990 Westlake Drive.
That's correct.
Eric, do we have new information,
Yes, I
additional
do.
information?
I spoke with Melissa from the building department. I also spoke with Joe Kojak, who is the building inspector. Here is the update. The property owners did pull a home demo permit. If you recall from the last meeting when the property owner came and said that. However, when the building inspector, Joe Kajak, went to the property and spoke to him again, let him know that a home remodel permit has to be pulled for this violation. To this date, there is no permit application that's been applied for. No permit has been issued. No building inspections have occurred. So for this case, because there's no attempt made at it, this violation still stands. And Charlie, based on the last case we just heard and everything I just stated, we can continue this one further, correct? Because a permit hasn't even been applied for.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to get it on record, seeing as we just had the previous case.
Do we have a copy of the order where we found them and imposed the fine and any stipulations as to a final inspection included?
Yes, I have it in my office. I don't have it here right now. I can check on the computer if you would like.
Please, because I think it'd be important if we need to modify that order.
Do we know what time of,
Well, I know
What
that
type
we
of
have a
remodel's
fine
being done?
running right. Oh, you have it?
Is that it? That's what I have in the file.
Yes, that's the order assessing fine.
Eric?
No, this one doesn't. What about the notice of violation? Or not the notice, the order of violation.
Order finding violation?
Yes.
Here you go.
Eric, at one point, Joe was supposed to be allowed to go in and inspect to see exactly what was being done.
That's correct.
Did he ever get permission to enter the property and go in and look and see? Because he was
yeah.
saying at one point, the gentleman, the homeowner, that he was only putting it back the way it was
Yeah.
when he bought the house.
I can't give a definitive answer, seeing as Mr. Kojak's not here. The only part that I can definitively say, which I do know, is that he met the homeowner at the property. Can't say if they went in, but I can say they met at the property. That is when our building inspector let the owners know that the remodel permit was required. That yes, they pulled the home demo permit, but based on the evidence that he saw, a home remodel permit was required because of the removal of the drywall and the possibility of stuff being moved in the kitchen.
Thank you.
So the order finding violation and the order assessing fines do not mention final inspection. But you imposed a fine. Let's see here, the fine was imposed,
January 22nd.
okay, January 22nd.
Didn't
But
they
they haven't
just buy
applied
this
for a
house?
permit yet.
wasn't this house just sold to these people?
Well, he's been
Yeah.
here before Halloween.
Yeah,
because
before
put up
He
the
put up that big
Halloween
thing, right?
structure.
Yeah.
Yes.
How do we know that he's doing a remodel?
So the previous building inspector, Manning, had gone out to the property when it was being worked on. The workers had opened up the door and allowed him in. That's where the photos came from.
Oh.
So there was a section of the wall that looked like it had been removed. In the kitchen, items looked like they had been removed. And then in the back corner, whatever that room is, there was missing drywall. So that's what initiated this, because the violations were also issued for the Halloween decorations. That came into compliance, but the remodel stuff was not. That's when it was initially heard. So the property owner, I believe, has been before the board twice in person.
This is before my time, but refresh me as to why why we're at $18,000 and we have nobody here to explain what's going on.
Well, the property owner knows what's going on and has been here. When he was initially cited, he contacted the building department. Him and Melissa went back and forth. He was not very kind to our town employees. When he spoke before the board the first time, there was a slight confrontational manner that he presented. After the first meeting, he did reach out again to the building department, spoke to Melissa, got an understanding of what he believed needed to be done. He pulled the demo permit. The new building inspector, Joe Kajak, spoke with him. After seeing the scope of the work, talk to the property owner and explain what he actually needs to come into compliance. Since that date, no permit for what's been required has been pulled or applied for.
That's incredible. Joe's extremely easy to work with. I think we're very fair as a town, and here we are 3 months later and we still don't have a permit. I'm just racking my head over this. I'm sorry.
No,
$15,000 isn't not chump change.
No, and I can't speak for property owners. I would have assumed he would have been here tonight. He was here for the other meetings. The notice of hearing was posted to the property, as were all the other ones. So I can't speak for why they're not here.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Eric. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
So, Eric, on October 17th, you noticed a violation that a home remodel permit was required.
That's correct.
And then in February, they applied for a demo permit.
If you recall, when the property owner came before the board, he said that, there wasn't work done. It was just a simple demo. He did pull the demo permit. But again, as the building inspector stated to him after speaking to him on the property, that based on the evidence he saw in the photographs, the removal of the drywall, that a home remodel permit was going to be required.
How much is a home remodel permit? Depending on the value of the permit or the value of the job?
So unfortunately, Melissa is not here this evening. I can gather that information for you. If you want to give me a call tomorrow, I'll have an answer for you.
I think it's estimated, it goes off the estimated value of the job.
Correct.
If I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Going through it myself. I mean, I'm just baffled by where we're at with this right now. I mean, he keeps his house tidy. I pass by it every day, probably 4 or 5 times a day with the bridge closed. So, aside from a trailer here and there, I really don't see any violations on his property. So like, why wouldn't he do his due diligence and work with the town? So I'm just a little confused on this one.
So the permit's still not been applied for.
No home remodel permit has been applied for. The only permit that was applied for was the demo.
And he's not had any inspections at all on that, right? Which
No,
would grant
from-
us access.
Can I also add that this town is extremely easy to work with? Like, you apply for a permit, we're there. Like, I mean, you have it 3 days later. It's not like West Palm Beach, Palm Beach County, where you're waiting months. So I don't understand. I really don't understand why it's so hard to come into compliance like everybody else.
So the thought now is we should just extend this, is that right?
So the fine is still running.
Right, the fine's running. Can we just impose the lien?
You can.
Oh, okay.
You have the ability to impose the lien, but you don't have to close the case out.
Right.
Right. And the fine will just continue to accrue until he applies for a remodel permit.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's correct.
And he's going to come before us and ask for a lien reduction, and we're going to have to go through this whole motion again, even though this has been going on since January or December.
I just have a question though. So if they impose the lien tonight, Charlie, do I hold off on recording it?
No, you don't have to. You can record it. Because they've made no attempt to come into compliance.
So then if we record it, it's not gonna go before the code enforcement board for a reduction. It will have to go before the council.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Eric, I have a question. What is going on with the property adjacent to him?
Well, let's get through this.
I'm
one,
sorry,
if you don't mind.
sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. We can discuss it at the end of the
Yeah, no.
Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Pat.
Based on the testimony and evidence presented in case number 24-0391, I move that a certified copy of the order to impose a lien be recorded in the public records of Palm Beach County, with such order to constitute a lien on respondents real and personal property as provided by law.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Okay, let's go on to page 3, new cases. 250048,
That's correct.
1921 Carandus Road.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Code Board. My name is Eric Richwagon, representing the town of Lake Clark Shores. This is case number 25-0048. Site property owner is identified as or by Valerie Tisaragatis. Apologize if I'm not saying it correctly. Site property address is 1921 Carandus Road, Lake Clark, Florida, 33406. 1 second.
Is that picture today, Eric?
Yes, I'll get to it. Just give me one moment. On 02/07/2025, a notice of violation was issued for code section 34-19 sub 9 sub B. The driveway needs to be pressure cleaned. A notice of hearing was issued on 04/11/2025. A reinspection of today's date shows that the violation still exists. It is my recommendation to give no more than 7 days to come into full compliance. Otherwise, a recommended fine of $50 a day may be imposed. I will also add that I have other violations on this property. I have had no communication with the owner. I posted to the property. I've sent all violations by mail as well. Nothing has been kicked back. Or I should say, nothing has been sent back to the PD. So the mail is going forward with no issues.
Over 2.5 months?
Have they corrected any of the other violations that you cited them for?
As of today, no. And if not, it'll be brought before next month's board, but that's a different possible case. And this property has had several violations from me. However, they have come into compliance in the past, just before it got before the code board.
As a novice, I can see a number of other violations, so those are the ones you've likely cited them for, correct?
Yeah, the hedges not being properly trimmed. The lawn is overgrown, and actually it's what you're seeing right there is mild on the right side of the property. The lawn is much more overgrown. So they've been cited for that. And there's also a new trailer that showed up that can't be in the driveway.
And the vehicle that looks like it's being worked on with the tires propped up in the front?
No, that vehicle is routinely being driven.
With the wheels like that?
Mhm. They change it up. They work on it, but so that vehicle used to be a little more of normal height. I'm assuming they're jacking it up even further, but I've seen it moved. Like it's there today, but when I drove by yesterday, the day before, it wasn't there. So that lets me believe it's operational. I can't see if it has a license plate on it, but in Lake Clark Shores, I would assume if they were driving without a license plate or expired tag, that our police department would handle them.
Going back to the other side. What is that object in the driveway?
Possible shirt, maybe a plastic bag,
Okay.
debris.
Look like a dog for a second.
It looks like bags of concrete on the front steps. So possible construction work going on.
None of the neighbors have
Kyle?
complained. All surrounding neighbors constantly inform me about this property. They're happy when they see me out there, and whenever they suspect anything, they call it in. They haven't called in about any construction noises. I haven't seen any work vehicles there.
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
Based on testimony and evidence presented in case number 25-0048, I move this board find the respondents in violation of section 34-19 sub 9 sub B of the town code of ordinance. Respondents shall comply with ordinance on or before, let's see,
April 30th.
April 30th. Respondents fail to comply with this order in a timely fashion and find the amount to exceed $50 per day will be imposed.
Second.
Fine assessment held on May 28th.
Deb, second.
Yes, sir.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next case, 250053, 0054, 0055 are all the same owners and same dates of initial notices of violation. Eric, you want to?
Yeah, we'll do them one by one, seeing as they're different code sections. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Code Enforcement Board. My name is Eric Richwagon, Code Enforcement Officer for the town of Lake Clark Shores. It's case number 25-0053. Site property owners identified by Calisti K. Capino and Jeremy B. Speckman. Site property address is 1511 Palm Circle, Lake Clark Shores, Florida, 33406. On 02/21/2025, a notice of violation was issued for code section 34-19 sub 7. There is open storage in the backyard that must be removed. A notice of hearing was issued on 04/11/2025. Photographs that were taken today by the complainant at the neighbor's address showed that the violations still exist. It's my recommendation to give no further time based on no contact with this owner and with a previous lien that's ongoing with this property for the front.
Sorry, what did you just say, the last part?
Oh, so the last part is this property came before, I believe, last month's code board. Well, either last month's or the one prior.
Yeah, I think
They're-
it was in February.
One prior.
Yeah, so they were in violation for having a vehicle, inoperable vehicle being worked on. Those are still ongoing to this day. The owner who stays there has made zero contact for anything, and we still have all of the surrounding neighbors complaining about this property. Again, neighbor was so kind to provide me with these photos.
Do you have a definition of the violation that was issued on the 21st of February?
A definition?
Yeah, like what
For
was,
open
just says
storage?
prohibited items.
Description.
Yeah, so the description is, if you look in there, broken pieces of concrete, you have a trampoline that's broken. If you scoot to another photo. Is there another photo?
No, not after that. There's the first photo here.
Okay, so over there's a construction debris. There's the temporary pool holding net. There's just a bunch of items. Well, and if you look below the pool, there's a bunch of concrete bags that the neighbors are saying have been there for well over a year.
Are there any open permits here?
No, there are no open permits for work being done on this pool. We'll hear that when that code section comes up.
Looks like a nuisance property.
Why don't we go ahead and discuss the two others, and then we can come back and make motions on each one individually, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, if you want to do it that way.
So the backyard needs to be mowed.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Okay, so case 25-0054, site property owner Calisti K. Capino and Jeremy B. Speckman, site property address 1511 Palm Circle, Lake Clark Shores, Florida, 33406. Give me 1 second. On 02/21/2025, notice of violation was issued for code section 34-19 sub 4. The backyard needs to be mowed. Notice of hearing was issued on 04/11/2025. photographs taken today showed that the violation still exists. It is my recommendation to give no more than 3 days to come into full compliance. If not, a fine of $75 a day may be imposed. And then, do you want me to go on to the next
Yes.
one, or does anyone have any questions about this one?
We can go back and forth on our discussion.
Okay, I just want to make sure no one had any questions before I continue. All right, next one, case 25-0055. Site property owners are identified by Calisti K. Capino and Jeremy B. Speckman. Site property address 1511 Palm Circle, Lake Clark Shores, Florida, 33406. On 02/21/2025, a notice of violation was issued for code section 10-991 sub A. The pool is being worked on without a permit. On 04/11/2025, a notice of hearing was issued. Photos taken today show that the violation still exists. After speaking with Melissa in the building department, a full search was done through the building department of a computer system. No permits found for work on the pool. And a 4-time permit assessment fee has been added. As previously stated, I've had 0 communication from the property owner. This goes back to the cases that were previously heard back in February.
What kind of work are they doing on the pool?
Well, as you can see, the pool is in a state of disrepair. They have the concrete bag, so it's possible that they were trying to resurface the inside of it. They were trying to add onto it, but the project has been in a state of, well, in this kind of state for well over a year. The neighbor who is complaining told me that about a year ago, he saw him attempting to work on the inside. I asked if any photographs were taken. Unfortunately, there was no evidence showing the property owner, Jeremy B. Speckman, physically mixing any cement or physically working inside the pool.
Eric, are there fences between the 2 adjoining properties?
Yes, there are. A violation was going to be issued for health and safety. However, on this side that you see, there is a closing part of the fence that's farther up. So it looks exposed there, but it's actually not.
How long have they been residents?
As long as I've been here, the first year and a half that I worked here, I didn't see them because the owner wasn't there. Lieutenant Dana Fisher, who was a previous code enforcement officer before me, has had several encounters with this property. I don't think I need to go into it, but if you want to see, the folder here is rather thick for a property. I mean, if you wanted me to go back, we can see what the earliest violation was.
There's been no contact again?
No. So
Do we know if the
we
occupied
got violations
residents?
going back to 2016.
How did you give the violation? Have you gone there in person to speak with the homeowner? Or?
No, based on the verbal hostility that this resident has towards code enforcement and law enforcement, for personal safety reasons, these violations are sent by mail.
And the homeowner does live there? The person that owns the house does live there? Do we know?
According to the residents and from my speculation, I have not seen them, but that does not mean that they are not there.
But none of the notices have been returned as far as you.
No notices have been returned, no NOVs, no NOHs, and even previously, the cases that were heard previously, same thing, they were sent out via they were sent out via mail. Nothing has been sent back.
Have we sent them like certified mail at all or no?
It's sent through regular mail because certified mail, they don't have to sign for it. If it gets sent regular mail, if it doesn't get delivered for any reason, they'll send it back, and I can use that as proof that maybe they are no longer living there or they no longer own it.
Okay.
This reminds me of another resident we have in town, but I mean, how do we come to a conclusion here?
Well, the properties have been noticed for different violations. So what we're going to do is take each case. We'll start with 0053 and open storage, which obviously there is. And would someone like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make one. Based on the testimony evidence presented in case number 2500-0048, I move this board.
53?
5-3.
Oh, sorry, yep, 5-3. I move that this board finds the response in violation of section 34-19 sub 7 of the town code of ordinance. Respondents shall comply with the town's code and ordinances on or before April 25th. The respondents failed to comply with this order in a timely fashion to find the amount of $50 per day, or not to exceed $50 per day, will be imposed. Fine assessment hearing will be held on May 28th if necessary.
Is there a second?
Second.
Deb, second?
Yep.
Further discussion?
Do they have any other outstanding liens or fines or?
I actually did speak with Emily earlier today, and several years ago, this property had violations. The owner, Jeremy Speckman, did come in, ask for a lien reduction. The code board was gracious enough to offer a lien reduction, and then that lien reduction amount was never paid.
So there's an outstanding lien on the property?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's correct.
How much is that outstanding lien?
What was that?
How much is that outstanding lien?
It's not very much. I don't, it's under $1,000. I don't remember the amount.
Because the code enforcement board was actually able to lower it probably from the thousands that it was to a much more understandable amount, and then it was just never paid.
But the lien was for a higher amount. And because they didn't pay the reduced amount, the lien that exists is for the higher amount.
It
No,
was never paid.
no, it's for the reduced amount.
Yeah,
For the reduced amount.
The reduced amount was never paid.
The reduced amount was never paid, but if the lien was filed on the original amount, if it's not paid, I would think that the lien would be at the higher amount.
Well, I don't think that's what the order said, but we can check.
I thought I heard you say the code board reduced the lien. Did I?
No, it wasn't the code board reduced the fine, not the lien.
Oh.
Yes.
I see.
Can we get a file of the actual liens or fines that have been placed on this property? So we can get an understanding of actually what is currently owed to the town?
Yeah, you can ask me for, the file whenever you want.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table and second.
Second.
It's been seconded. Yep, seconded. You ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right, we'll go to the next case. Same property, 250054. The backyard needs to be mowed, obviously.
Excuse me, I missed so you found the person in violation. Did you put a possible fine amount?
$50.
50? Okay,
And it
thank
was
you.
will be.
Will be.
Will be. Okay, thank you.
Do we know the circumstances of these people? Like, are they unemployed or
I
going through some
do,
hardship?
but for legal reasons, I'm not obliged to say
Understood?
due to acts of privacy. But I can tell you that I do have an understanding of what's going on. And I also have an understanding of why the property owner doesn't really want to do anything with code enforcement or acknowledge it due to unpleasantries towards code enforcement and law enforcement. That's the only thing that I can state.
Understood. Thanks.
Someone like to make a motion?
Sure. Unless somebody else does. Based on testimony evidence presented in case number 25-0054, I move this board find the response in violation of sections 34-19 sub 4 of the town code of ordinance. Respondents shall comply with the town code of ordinance on and before April 30th. Respondents fail to comply with this order in a timely fashion and find the amount not to exceed $50 per day will be imposed. Fine assessment hearing will be on May 28th.
Second.
Effective what, April 25th? Is it
Yeah, they have till April, they have till April
2 days.
28th,
the 28th?
28th.
Okay.
Okay, so this one is 28, the other one was 25th?
The other one was 25th.
Both been,
Oh,
No, the other one was
I think the one
25th.
was the 20.
the first one you said
We
25th.
should make them all the
okay, yeah,
25th.
yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
And this one you want the 25th?
25th.
Okay.
Make them all the same.
And what is the amount again?
50,
50?
not to exceed 50.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Morty, second. Okay.
Second. Sorry, second.
Get in there.
I
Okay.
gotta get in there. I'm gonna be active.
All right.
I'm
Further-
new. I'm the FNG.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next case, 0055, same property.
Keep going.
Keep going. Wanna roll
I
ahead?
do have further comment though. so-
Okay, based on testimony and evidence in case number 25-055, I move this board find the response in violation of section 1091 sub A of the town code of ordinances. Respondents shall comply to the town's code of ordinances on or before. They say this.
25th.
This has been April 25th. Respondents fail to comply with this order in a timely fashion and find the
$50.
amount not to exceed $150 per day
Hmm.
will be imposed. Fine assessment will be heard on May 28th if necessary.
Where'd you get 150 from?
I just said it.
Okay.
Because it's been a year, like,
Okay.
you know.
I think,
I'm not disagreeing with you. Everything's $50.
For the permits is.
I think our guide is actually 250.
The construction permit is
Guide.
250, right?
Huh?
But it is just a guide, right?
Yes, it's just a guide.
Protected
Just a
pool.
guide.
It is protected.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the applicant isn't here, but on the evidence that's presented, it doesn't appear to me that any work's being done on that pool. And so I'm not sure that they're in violation of that section of the code because it doesn't look to me like it's being worked on. It
What's
looks
that
like it's in
orange
total
construction?
disrepair.
Right.
So is
But
there a
which is not
fine
what
for
they were cited
disrepair?
for.
And exactly, and they're not here to defend themselves.
Could it be listed as health and safety, obviously?
Well,
Well, but that's not what they were cited for, and they're not here to present any contrary evidence, but
So Charlie, so given the disrepair of the property, given, the other two outstanding notices, and the orange gate around the pool, I mean, where do we stand with these people?
you're required to
mhm.
hear evidence and make a determination as to whether or not the evidence supports the violation.
Right.
And
So the pool is in disrepair would be a better,
but that's not
that's not
what
the
the
case tonight.
citation is. And I fully understand that there's cement bags there, but the testimony was that they've been there for a year.
Right.
And if that's the case, then I question whether work's being done.
Obviously, we
And
don't
I
want to waste.
obviously, you only have the testimony of the code enforcement officer, not the testimony of the property owner. And you're entitled to base your decision on that testimony. But if I were sitting on the board, I would ask to continue this to the May meeting for additional evidence that they are actually doing work.
I can agree with that because I can talk to the complainant, the one who has been constantly following up with us,
Right.
the one who sent me these photos. So perhaps if we can get the resident to come in and give their testimony, that can help to support this further.
Absolutely.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Well, we have to do something with this
Yeah.
motion or this.
Is it a continuation?
But Eric, you could also potentially consider another violation related to the pool.
Just repair of the pool as opposed to,
No work.
Like I said,
I mean, the way I look at it, this picture right here. it's
Looks
a
like the pool's empty too.
It's a safety issue.
well,
So there's
the
no
home
gate around
was-
it. If some kid were to wander off and find its way into the pool.
Well, both sides of the property are properly secured, so someone can't technically wander back there.
Okay.
So it is secured. They did have to put up that netting because when the part of the fence that was missing, I did cite them for having a open exposed pool, and they did put up, although it wasn't the best job, they did secure the left side of the property.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is just ask Eric to see if he can come back with some additional information to support that work's being done without a permit.
Mhm.
Because it doesn't appear to me that anything's being done.
Mhm. So you withdraw your
I withdraw
motion
my motion.
and consider making another motion to
My friend over here is going to make a motion.
that,
I'll
Pat?
make a motion.
Okay,
Based on the testimony and evidence presented in case number 25-0055, I move that this board continues this matter until Code Enforcement Board hearing on May 28th, 2025.
is there a second?
Second.
Morty seconds?
Yeah.
A second.
Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. I think that's it. Is that it, Eric?
That is correct.
Yep.
Okay, before we go into new business and a new member, well, we can go ahead. Let's go ahead with the new business and new board orientation. Mr. Scheck?
And I'll keep this brief because I know most of you already know this. It's not new, but code enforcement can be handled in two different ways. One is with a code enforcement board and the other is with a special magistrate. The state statute, which is chapter 162 of the Florida statutes, allows the town to choose, and they have chosen, of course, to have the code enforcement board. Because there are multiple members of the board, you are subject to the Florida Sunshine Law. You are not allowed to discuss any matter which is likely to come before this board amongst yourselves outside of the code enforcement board noticed meetings. The law requires you to apply fundamental fairness to all the participants, all the owners of property who have been cited for a violation. You are to apply the law to the facts as presented, and all parties are provided a reasonable opportunity to be heard on the matter. Unfortunately, a number of our citizens don't take advantage of that and don't show up. And so there's no rebuttal of the testimony presented by the town. And therefore, the only evidence you have is that evidence presented by the town, and you're allowed to act on that evidence. As I stated earlier, it has to be substantially competent evidence. That requires it to be sworn. And you obviously have the ability to determine and weigh the evidence that's presented either for or against the code violation. The aggrieved party, if a party is not happy with the order of the code enforcement board, does not have the opportunity to go to the town council to object and ask for the town council to undo or change what the code enforcement board has done. The appeal is directly to the circuit court, and the court will review whether procedural due process was afforded, whether the administrative body applied the correct law, you being the administrative body, and whether the findings are supported by substantial competent evidence. One of the things that I need to caution you on is ex parte communications. The reason that you are required to disclose visits to the property And as the chairman correctly noted, not just visits to the property, but any communications you have outside of the board hearing is to determine whether or not you have influenced your opinion based on evidence that's not substantially competent. The law provides that you're to make your decision based on the testimony you hear here. In fact, at one point in Florida law, you were prohibited to consider any ex parte communications, and that would include the site visits. But the Florida League of Cities went to the legislature a number of years ago and said that law should be changed, and ex parte communications now can take place. They're discouraged, but if they do take place, they must be disclosed, and the party who is being cited has the ability to cross-examine a board member based on that ex parte communication. I personally do not see any problem with any board member driving by the property to familiarize themselves with the property. That does need to be disclosed. From time to time, a code board member will talk to a neighbor or the owner of the property. I highly discourage that, but if it happens, that has to be disclosed. The purpose
It's a
of
violation. I'm sorry.
it's no longer a violation of the statute. It can take place, but it has to be disclosed. But the problem is that you are not allowed to have an opinion about the matter before the matter is heard here before you. So if you formulate an opinion because of communication you've had prior to the hearing, you become tainted, and your position and fairness on the board can be challenged. The law says you can have that communication. It has to be fully disclosed. I discourage it. I can't tell you you can't have it because the law does allow it, but it's not something that should be done on a routine basis. The intent is that you come here impartial to the matter and you base your finding on the facts and testimony that are presented. Normally, there should be the testimony of the violation by the staff, the response by the accused violator and any other concerned citizens, and an ability to rebut any evidence that's given. Unfortunately, a lot of our residents don't avail themselves of that opportunity, and therefore you have to base your decision on the facts as presented, and there is no rebuttal or contrary testimony because they're not here.
Question.
But
Would that discussion include, for instance, Eric, on an individual basis?
it would, if Eric, if you're talking about the case outside of the hearing, yes, it would include discussions with him if he's advising you about the matter outside of the hearing.
Right.
And what the law actually says, by publicly taking a position either for or against the matter prior to the actual hearing, you're disqualified from actually voting. So if you have formulated an opinion because you've talked to Eric or you've talked to the neighbor or the violator, that's a basis to challenge the decision in court, or you should come and say, I've already formulated an opinion and therefore I'm going to abstain. The best thing is not to formulate an opinion, but base it on the testimony that's presented at the hearing.
Right.
The law requires you to have findings of fact, and that's based on either expert testimony or the citizens' testimony. It's rare that we have expert testimony, but somebody can bring somebody in as an expert to talk about a matter. And the decision, if there is no rebuttal to the evidence presented by staff, it's hard to appeal that to the circuit court because there's no contrary evidence. And so rarely do we have cases appealed, but it does happen from time to time. The one thing that I think is very, very important for all of you to know is you are subject to the Sunshine Law. That means that no discussions should take place outside of the hearing and amongst yourselves, and no off the record discussions should take place before the hearing or during the hearing. So if one of you leans over to one of the other and whispers something to that person that's not audible by the applicant who is or the alleged violator who is here, they have a right to know what you just said. This happened at the county many years ago when a very attractive young lady walked in and one of the board members commented on her appearance to the other code board member sitting next to him. And it had nothing to do with the case, but there was an attorney representing the person and he demanded to know what the person said. And I had to tell them that they had to tell him what they said because it was off the record. So you can't have sidebar comments. If you bring notes, you can refer to those notes, but if you, and you can take notes, but if you bring notes and you start reading from those notes are public record. So you're entitled to have notes regarding the statute if you've looked at the statute. But if you start reading from them, they become part of the public record. If you text or communicate through emails on your phone regarding the matter, even though it's a private phone, those texts and emails are public record and they have to be disclosed. So I discourage you from going on Facebook. In some communities, blogs and Facebook are very, and Twitter and X and some of the others are very popular, and residents are communicating back and forth. And unfortunately, every now and then, it doesn't really happen with code board members, but with some of the elected officials, they feel compelled to start texting and blogging with the citizens, and that creates monumental problems. So my advice is, as it relates to code enforcement, just don't get involved in any communications back and forth because all of that information is discoverable. Do you have any questions? The one thing I do want to caution, and whenever I was actually representing people in front of zoning boards and code boards, I always went to the meeting early and sat in the front because invariably, as the board members would come in, they'd start talking about the matters on the agenda. Or they'd all go to dinner afterwards. And I would follow them and sit at a table next to them because invariably they'd talk about it. And then I just won my case because I had a Sunshine Law violation. And under Sunshine Law, it's void ab initio, void from the start if Sunshine Law is violated. So I caution you, wait till the meeting is called to order to talk about the cases and don't have sidebar comments because it will get you in trouble. I actually won a big case in front of the city of West Palm Beach with their zoning board where they denied my client a permit for a sign, and they were discussing the whole matter when I walked into the meeting before the meeting started. So the next day I met with the city manager and the city attorney and said, here's what I have. I think you need to issue the permit for the sign. And within a week, I had the permit for the sign. It's unfortunate because we're all tempted to talk about the matters, but I just want to caution you because in these cases, we don't typically have big concerns. They're small matters, but those small matters can turn into a big issue if somebody has the money and the desire to fight and can find that there is a violation of the Sunshine Law. So the two key things are public records. You don't want to create public records on your phone by texting and emails. You don't want to violate the Sunshine Law by talking to each other and communicating with each other. If you do go by the site, you need to disclose it. If you happen to talk to the person because they were there and you have a communication, you need to disclose that. Another matter that I think is very, very important, you as the code board have to remain impartial. So you cannot initiate the violation. That's the responsibility of the code enforcement officer. You don't become second-class citizens by being on the code board. So if you see what you believe is a potential violation, you certainly have the ability to bring it to his attention. The law says there's no confidential informants. You have to identify who the person is who's complaining. I recommend that you not be the party complaining, because if you're the party complaining and that comes out during a hearing, I'm going to advise you that you have to abstain from voting because you're no longer impartial, because you filed the complaint with code enforcement. So my advice is don't file complaints unless you intend to abstain from hearing the matter. But if you see something, you can say, Eric, why don't you drive by and see if this is a violation on this property?
And that's permissible.
That's permissible. But again, it's not your job to be the policeman for the town for code enforcement. It's his job. Your job is to hear it when it's presented to you, not to go out and find it. So I caution you on being the initiator of the violation notice. Let the town staff do that, and you remain impartial. Again, you don't become second-class citizens, but just use discretion and don't be the party who decides to drive through town once a week and say, whoa, these are all in violation. I need to call the code enforcement officer. Now, if there is something that is a concern, you certainly have the ability to bring it to his attention.
Charlie, with that said, I think we're all pretty busy individuals. And Eric is a pretty busy individual as well, like yourself. I think the last thing that we think about is representing ourselves in a violation situation.
And know that if you have a conflict of interest, and you did exactly correct tonight by disclosing the relationship, but the law says that there has to be a personal gain that inures to your benefit. In this case, I didn't see that there was any gain that you were going to be receiving by voting on this one way or the other. But typically, if it's a husband and wife or a father-daughter, mother-daughter situation, then you're better off abstaining. But just because you happen to know the person, just because you happen to be friends with the person, doesn't in and of itself create a conflict of interest.
Thank you for that clarification.
But you do need to disclose it so that if somebody wants to question you further to make sure that you're not biased because of the relationship, they have the ability to do that.
Charlie, I feel like we need to vocalize the fact that we're not an HOA, we're a municipality. And I think that people have the opportunity to come up here and be present. It's amazing. This is my second meeting and there's nobody here. It's remarkable.
it's mind boggling, because I have,
Can we get A signs out there for the code board,
It's-
just like the
it's-
council meeting?
it's
Because
just
This is
the nature.
remarkable.
It's the nature of the beast today. I do not understand it.
As a person building a house in this town and owns another property in this town, I know what it takes to go through the whole motions of filing permits and everything else. Melissa is fantastic.
Well, and
Eric is fantastic. This town is fantastic. Like, we could be living in Palm Beach County where we're waiting for 3 months for a permit.
a year ago, I got cited for a mildewed driveway and a mildewed roof. I called the code enforcement officer, told him I would take care of it, told him that I needed some time to get the person to do the roof because I didn't want him to go up there and blast all the grid off my fiberglass shingles. I wanted somebody who knew what they were doing so that they didn't destroy my roof. And they worked with me because I worked with them. I don't understand why the citizens ignore the code enforcement board.
For the
It is-
record, there's nobody here, no
It's
resident.
just the worst thing in the world to do because I have never found a code enforcement officer or a code board or a special magistrate that wasn't willing to work with a person who was willing to get the violation corrected.
I think it's important that our record note whether the property owner has been present for these hearings, because when it gets to a lien being filed and then they appeal it before the town council,
Yeah.
one of the questions that's responded to is, I never heard, or I don't know anything about how this happened. And did we communicate with the property owner, and how did we communicate with the property owner? And if the record shows that Eric's not been able to have any communication and they never came to any of the.
I think it's appropriate that that be on the record
Yeah.
so that the record shows that there was no one who responded to the notice of violation.
Thank you, Chairman, for that. That's, I mean, I really, I share the same sentiment. Like, it does not take very long to be present. And I think, especially when there's thousands of dollars accruing against your property.
I have never had a situation where I personally have had a violation that I couldn't resolve amicably without ever showing up at the code board.
I'm the youngster in this town. I've only been living here for 5 years, but I can tell you I've been violated. And I can tell you I've come into compliance as soon as that warning hits my mailbox.
Yep.
There's
And
no
I
reason for it.
I don't understand the complacency of some people, but it's the nature of the beast today. That's all I have unless you have questions.
Actually, I have a question. We talked, I think, last month about repeat offenders. Now, let me give you an example. I have a trailer in my yard. Eric cites me, gives me a week to get it out of there. I get it out of there for a week, bring it back the following week. He cites me again. Is that a repeat offender?
I think the code says within 72 days.
Yeah.
Whatever. Just I had a
It
violation.
certainly, it can be.
Okay.
It depends on the nature of the violation, because in some cases, you're allowed to have a trailer if you're unloading, you're working. So if it's there again, but there's a legitimate reason for it to be there, it's not a repeat violation, but it could very well amount to a repeat violation.
I've been cited for this. I mean,
My point is, I was in violation. There's no question about it. So I get the notice of violation, and I have a week, 2 weeks, whatever, to fix it. Within the 2 weeks, I fix it. Eric comes by, everything's okay. Then that third week, I do the same violation. Is that a repeat offender?
It sounds to me like it is, but we need to look at each individual case and the circumstances, because if I tell you absolutely yes, it is, there could be a reason that it's not.
Charlie, I think that we were told by Bill Doney that it's a repeat violation only if the board found the owner in violation.
Yes,
Within-
Yes.
in the
yes,
past
yeah,
5
you have,
years.
you have to have a violation in order for it to be a repeat violation, absolutely.
Does it have to come in front of the code?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So in my example too, then I'm not a repeat
No,
violator. I'm upsetting Eric, but I'm not a repeat.
correct, because you didn't get violated.
In a situation like that, I would then present it to the board and let the board know that this is an ongoing thing.
Yes.
That way,
And-
if it came before the board again, you heard testimony, showing that it came before the board once and that they were continuously doing it. And then when it gets brought before the board again, it makes it a stronger case to put them as a repeat violator.
Yes, and it also can influence the amount of the fine that you impose.
Yeah. Okay. That's it.
All right. If there's nothing else for Charlie, we'll go on to any board comments or suggestions. Anybody have anything? Or are you ready to adjourn?
Ready to adjourn?
Is there a motion?
I second.
So moved.
Motion's been moved and Pat
Yeah.
seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you. Charlie.
Thank you for letting me join you this
Well, it's
evening.
Good to have you back.
Bill and I are swapping out. I'm having a hip replacement on